So, we've talked about these before, but to declare independence, somebody's going to have to introduce a resolution. Remember what a resolution was? A will of intent. Okay? Somebody has to introduce a resolution. And who are they going to, what group is going to do that? What's running the country, so to speak? No, they're way back. We've had a first and now we have a second Continental Congress. So on June 7th of 1776, on June 7th of 1776, a fellow by the name of Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution in the Second Continental Congress. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution, or a will or intent. And he introduced that in the Second Continental Congress. And in that resolution, I want you to write this quote down. This is what he declared. So on June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution in the Second Continental Congress that stated, quote, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." He declared, quote, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." One more time. He declared in his resolution, quote, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." So he didn't require. He did not refer to the colonies as the United States, did he? He referred to them as the United Colonies. Why? Because they are not what at this time? Independent. Okay? Now, on June 11th, 4 days later, before they voted on Lee's resolution, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to write a formal Declaration of Independence. So 4 days later, on June 11th, 1776, before the Second Continental Congress voted on whether to accept Lee's resolution or not, they did appoint a committee of 5 men to write a formal Declaration of Independence. So again, on June 11th, before voting on Lee's resolution to declare independence, the Congress appointed a committee of 5 to write a formal Declaration of Independence. So before you accept a resolution to declare your independence, wouldn't you kind of like to see how the Declaration of Independence read, so you know what you're accepting? That's why they did that. So 4 days after Richard Henry Lee gives his resolution that the American colonies should declare their independence, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee of 5 to write a formal Declaration of Independence, so they knew what they were getting into. Now, who were the authors of the Declaration of Independence? Who wants to give me one? Josh?
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson was one. Some of you guys did reports. Maybe you can tell me. Who wants to give me another one? You sneak on your ID sheet, it might help you. Robert R. Livingston was another. How about another? Go ahead. Roger Sherman. I want to see if you know the other two. So we've got Thomas Jefferson, Robert R. Livingston, and Roger Sherman off of the ID sheet. Andrew, throw a wag out there and tell me who you might think wrote that. Familiar name in history. 2 more. Give me one. Let's hear it. See if you got her going.
James Madison did something with something.
Well, not that, but that's a good guess. Charles, throw something out. Benjamin Franklin. Very good, Charles. Benjamin Franklin. And the last one, someone we've heard of, was actually a defense lawyer. Alexa, defense lawyer turned president. John
No, John.
Adams. John Adams. So the 5 men that were appointed to write a formal Declaration of Independence were Thomas Jefferson, Robert R. Livingston, Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. Now, who was assigned to actually do the writing? The other ones were just going to put in their input, but who is actually going to write it? Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's the actual author of the Declaration of Independence. He was assigned to do the actual writing of the Declaration of Independence. Well, so what happens here is Richard Henry Lee introduces a resolution on June 7th. On June 11th, the Second Continental Congress appoints a committee to write it, and then on June 28th, the committee presented Lee's resolution and the written Declaration of Independence to the Second Continental Congress for adoption. Okay, so the resolution was introduced on June 7th. The Declaration they began writing on June 11th after the appointment of the 5 committee members. Then on June 28th, this committee of Jefferson, Franklin, Adams, Livingston, and Sherman presented not only Lee's resolution for independence, but the writing that they had done called the Declaration of Independence to the Second Continental Congress for their adoption. Well, they debated it, right? They're going to talk about it back and forth. And finally, Congress, now listen to this carefully, Congress adopted Lee's resolution on July 2nd, 1776. They adopted Lee's resolution that the United Colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. They adopted his resolution on July 2nd, 1776. Now, just so you know, by adopting Lee's resolution on July 2nd, the Continental Congress officially declared the United States of America, and it to be independent from Great Britain. So it took the resolution to make that happen. We still have not got a formal Declaration of Independence, though, adopted, have we? But I want to make sure you understand that. By adopting Lee's resolution on July 2nd, 1775, the Continental Congress officially declared the new United States of America to be independent from Great Britain. So what did the Second Continental Congress do then on July 3rd? Started what? Studying the Declaration of Independence that was written by those 5 committee members, specifically Thomas Jefferson. And they turned their concentration on to Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence on July 3rd of 1776. And finally, they made a few changes in the original document. Finally, on July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence.
Is it 1775 or 1776?
Six.
Okay,
Six.
you said 5.
Six. So, let's kind of go back to the timeline so we understand. It was on June 7th of 1776 that Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced the resolution in the Second Continental Congress declaring that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. 4 days later, on June 11th, before they voted on Lee's resolution, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee of 5 to write a formal Declaration of Independence that included Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Robert R. Livingston, and Roger Sherman. Thomas Jefferson was assigned to do the actual writing of the Declaration. On June 28, 1776, that committee presented Lee's resolution and the Declaration of Independence to Congress for adoption. It was on July 2nd of 1776 that Congress debated, then approved or adopted Lee's resolution. With that adoption, the Continental Congress officially declared the new United States of America be independent from Great Britain. Then on July 3rd, 1776, the Second Continental Congress turns their attention onto Thomas Jefferson's written Declaration of Independence, and finally, after a few changes, Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. In bold strokes, John Hancock of Massachusetts, President of the Second Continental Congress, was first to sign the document. And he signed it in big, bold strokes so that the king would not have to put his eyeglasses on to read it. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of concentrate on reactions to the Declaration of Independence, because do you think everybody in the colonies reacted the same to that Declaration of Independence? They did not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you the differences. There actually were three different reactions. What do you think they were? Yay and whatever. Okay? So we're going to kind of give you those three reactions. Okay? The first reaction was by the Patriots, who obviously rejoiced at the news. Okay? So the first reaction were the Patriots. They were also known as Whigs. W-H-I-G-S. So Patriots or Whigs rejoiced at the news. Rejoiced at the news. Other Americans kind of greeted the news of the Declaration of Independence with indifference. Well, okay, that's fine, or whatever. You know what I mean? That's the second reaction. Yeah, just indifference. Just indifference. And of course, what was the third celebration? Well, no celebration. Actually, they refused to celebrate independence, and that were the also known now as Tories. Very good. So you had three different reactions to the Declaration of Independence. You had the Patriots, also known as Whigs, who were rejoicing at the news. You had other Americans who greeted the news with indifference. They really weren't concerned either way. And the Loyalists, now known as Tories in the colonies, refused to join in the celebration of independence. Now, basically, the Tories were regarded by the Patriots as what? Or T-word. Or traitors. Traitors to their country. Now, what group of people in the colonies made up Tories or Loyalists? These are the people that made up that group. Might surprise you. Wealthy merchants. Wealthy merchants were Tories. Wealthy landowners. Lawyers. And church leaders. Those were the group of people in the colonies at the time that reacted unfavorably to the Declaration of Independence, or known as Loyalists, or in the colonist terms now, Tories. Okay, I want you to go in the back of your handouts and pull out that assignment that Josh has been wondering about for a while. And I'm going to use Rachel's here, and I'm going to explain this to you. This is a reading-writing assignment. Here it is. Okay, what you're asked to do is read and then answer the question on the back. Identify the 5 most significant words in this document and explain your choices. Now, is it possible that Lex's 5 words might be different than Rachel's? Because it's an opinion. So where do you justify your answers is explaining your choices of why those 5 words were the most significant to you. So you are to read this. It says, that Thomas Jefferson, Virginia planter and delegate to the Continental Congress, was asked to write a justification for America's independence, he drew from Enlightenment ideas that were familiar to many British Americans. Congress adopted Jefferson's Declaration on July 4th, 1776. So this is part of it. You are to read this, pick out the 5 most significant words, and explain why those 5 are significant to you. That will be due Thursday by the start of the period. Thursday by the start of the period, because I'm going to be gone Friday, and we'll talk about that later. Those are due Thursday at the start of the period. Again, it's an effort assignment. You have to use some thinking, and there's no wrong or right answer. What's wrong or right is how you justify your answer. Okay? All right, we are moving on to the test review. Okay? So get your notes out, your highlighters, and we're going to review up for a test. And we're going to start with Alexa. She's going to give me the answer to this question. You ready, dear? Who is the British spy who discovered Patriot stockpiling of gunpowder, ammunition, and rifles at Concord and reported that back to General Thomas Gage? John Howe. Very good. So if you start the start of your notes, you'll be right on here. McKenna? Who, along with Samuel Adams, was a target for arrest by the British prior to the British advance to Lexington and Concord? Who were the British going to kidnap other than Samuel Adams? And Paul Revere and Samuel Dawes, on their way to Lexington, one of their jobs, other than letting them know that the British soldiers were marching, also had to warn these 2 guys that they were in danger. John Hancock, very good. John Hancock. Okay, Julie. Who was the 78-year-old man who took on British redcoats outside his farmhouse during the British retreat from Concord? Who was that old fella that went crazy on him?
It was Samuel Whitmore.
Samuel Whitmore, yep. Some people pronounce it Whittemore, some Whitmore. Okay, that's right though. Okay, Mackenzie, my dear, who did join Paul Revere in the initial ride to Lexington, warning the citizens of the British advance upon that city? William Dawes Jr. Very good. Elise? Who was the man, fresh off the hot date, who warned the citizens of Concord of the British advance upon that city?
Samuel Prescott.
Samuel Prescott. Very good. Meg? Who was the leader of 77 colonial Minutemen at the Battle of Lexington? Who led 77 colonial Minutemen at the Battle of Lexington? Remember, they were outgunned 10-1.
Was it Ethan Allen?
Nope, you're too far in your notes. Back up, dear. Rachel?
John P.
What's that?
John P. Parker.
John Parker. Very good. John
just
Parker.
have it written
Yeah, he's going to go by John P. This isn't
Sorry,
rap.
John
Johnny
Parker.
P. It's John Parker.
Okay.
Okay. Rachel. Who is the British officer who fought at Lexington and Concord, eventually losing his life during the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill? John Pitcairn. Very good. He was a British officer who fought Lexington and Concord and eventually lost his life during the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill. Okay, Emily, pay attention to Meg's first response. Who was the leader of the Green Mountain Boys who led in the capture of British forts north of Massachusetts? Who was the leader of the Green Mountain Boys who led in the capture of British forts north of Massachusetts? Ethan Allen is exactly right. Okay, Andrew, who is the delegate during the Second Continental Congress who declared, "Give me liberty or give me death"?
Patrick Henry.
What?
Patrick Henry.
Patrick Henry. Yep, Patrick Henry. Peyton? During that Second Continental Congress, who was the conservative delegate from Pennsylvania?
John Dickinson.
John Dickinson is exactly right. Charles, who was the African-American hero at the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill who proclaimed, "Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own"? Who was that African-American hero? Not a rich man.
Salem Poor.
Salem Poor. Salem Poor. Okay, Andy. Who is the British general who replaced General Thomas Gage after the fighting at Breeds or Bunker Hill? Who is the British general who replaced General Thomas Gage after the fighting at Breeds or Bunker Hill? He also made the decision to pull British troops and ships out of Boston.
You know?
Do I know? Yeah, I know.
I'm trying to find it.
Well, give it a good howl. I know you can do it.
James Moore. No.
Yeah, you're back too far.
Sir William Howe.
Sir William Howe, thanks to your friend over there. Okay, back to your friend over there. Who led the Patriot cause at the Lexington and Concord of the South in North Carolina, Ryland? Mr. Know-it-all over there.
Hey, I only do that one.
Well, think about his bad answer and you might get it right. Led the Patriot cause at the Lexington and Concord of the South in North Carolina. Led the Patriot cause. Had a bridge named after him.
Oh, Moore.
James Moore, very good. Brian, who is the man from Virginia who introduced a resolution in the Second Continental Congress declaring that, quote, "These united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states"? Richard Henry Lee is right. And how perfect is this?